I'm really pleased to be working with Bruce Brown today. Bruce has been in the marine industry for most of his adult life and has specialized in safety equipment. He's a member of the U.S. Sailing Safety at Sea Committee, as well as being a Safety at Sea moderator for our in-person courses. Bruce, I'd like us to start out by talking about the different categories of life rafts and how somebody might kind of select what's the right life raft for their application. So first, let's talk about the sort of characteristics of rafts for, coastal use all the way to offshore use.
Sure. So rafts from various manufacturers might start as simple as a platform, which would be a device that has one or maybe two chambers, no canopy, no ballast bags, and are really designed for inside protected bays and harbors, only to get somebody out of the water until rescue.
Okay, so if you were going in an offshore race, would that be allowed?
No, in no way is it designed for offshore applications.
Okay, so what's the first level of life raft that would have a canopy and more stuff?
So when we get to a coastal type life raft, these are rafts that would have a single tube most likely, and would have a canopy with a very modest equipment pack, would have a ballast bag, a way to keep the raft from flipping over in wind, and these become devices then that make it relatively safe for people that are going short distances where rescue would be imminent within 24 hours.
Okay, so here we're currently in Newport Harbor and on the coast of California. We've got an 800-mile coast, and yet a lot of people are going up and down that coast with no intercoastal waterway, and yet they wonder if they need a life raft or not. Would a coastal life raft fill that need?
So in an area where rescue would be imminent within 24 hours, it might make perfect sense. Along the coast of California, it might absolutely make sense. It won't make sense if you cruise the coast of Mexico, where even though you're the same distance offshore, rescue would not be imminent within 24 hours.
Okay, so what's the next step after a coastal life raft?
So now we get to the offshore life raft, a raft that has twin tubes that are totally redundant. In other words, they support the rated capacity of the raft singularly if one fails or the other. And these rafts are packed with more equipment, with more stability in the ballast bags, with sea anchors, with signaling devices. These rafts are for offshore passage making.
Okay, so we've got these flat discs, we've got coastal rafts, and we've got offshore rafts. So if I go, is there a specific standard? If I go in and say I want an offshore raft, does it guaranteed to meet some standard?
No, so some life rafts are manufactured to specific standards of inspection or specific standards of requirements of equipment. These could be for offshore racing. That standard is set by World Sailing.
Okay.
They could be for commercial vessels in the United States. That might be a Coast Guard approved life raft.
Okay.
Or for international standards, that might be a SOLAS life raft, whose standards are written by the International Maritime Organization.
Okay, so there are different standards organizations. I noticed, for example, you and I did a Safety at Sea seminar in Miami, and all the Volvo 60s of that era were in the port, and they all had SOLAS life rafts. So how did Volvo end up, in that case, choosing a SOLAS life raft?
So here was an event that was going to circumnavigate the world in the harshest of conditions, and the possibility of these boats actually getting in trouble was relatively reasonable. And so a SOLAS life raft would have redundant equipment and additional thermal protection from cold weather in thermal canopy, ways that people would probably not have to face if they were yacht racing, for instance, or just doing a passage as cruisers.
Okay, so you're sailing on the Transpac this summer.
I am.
I think it's the 50th anniversary of the
It is.
Transpac, one of the great yacht races of the world.
True.
And what life raft is a Transpac boat equipped with, or is in this notice of race?
Sure. So the standard is a raft that meets World's Sailing Standard for an offshore life raft, which is a standard actually written by an international body that describes everything from the fabric and construction type to the equipment that's packed in it, the amount of rations and supplies that might be found in the life raft, the amount of space per person that the life raft would contain. And that standard is a standard then that every manufacturer supplying a raft for this type of event has to meet, and so every skipper has to ensure that they have a raft that meets that specific standard.
I see. So the notice of race is an important document in this process defining, if you're racing, what you've got to carry. So even if you have a perfectly great cruising life raft that you picked up someplace that you think has great features, if it doesn't meet that standard, you can't race with it.
Correct. And so it's really important that manufacturers work with resellers or life raft servicing agencies to ensure that the raft that they're purchasing meets the standard that the notice of race requires.
Okay, so I think in summary, what we've got are some descriptive terms that we use for life rafts, but they may or may not meet international standards. We also have standards that are intended for commercial vessels, like ferries and fishing boats and ocean liners. And those might be over the top for anything that a yachtsman would use. But if you are a racer, one of the key things is to make sure it meets the requirements that are specified in the notice of race.